Almost everyone has, at some point in their life, been sick of the artificiality that is civilized living. The facade we have to maintain, the masked persona that we want to get rid of once and for all. Many things that we have to do are far removed from what we actually want to do. Some things even contradict our basic compassionate instincts towards our fellow beings. As a result, it is not unusual to feel that humanity as a whole would have been better had the contradictions that societal life gives rise to not been present. There's a reason why the various return to monk memes went so viral on the internet a few years back, right? We will be focusing on this very thought or feeling in this video today. The latest video that I did on this channel was on the famed French Enlightenment. But the thinker I am going to cover today is too giant and complex a figure in the history of thought to be clubbed together under a heading. Not to mention that many of his cherished ideas go quite against the general spirit of the age. I am talking about none other than Jean-Jacques Rousseau. It can be a bit tricky to decide on whether to start when one attempts to understand the work of such a monumental thinker, who has given so many influential ideas. But luckily, in the case of Rousseau, one can begin by going through his very first published work, because it contains the theme that he would dedicate his entire intellectual life to, and with which we started this video. As I said, Rousseau went directly against the spirit of his age in quite a few important ways. And none can be as startling as his argument, in the beginning of his intellectual career at least, that civilization and society actually had a destructive impact on human beings. This went directly against the ethos of the Enlightenment, which championed human progress in the arts, sciences, politics, and morality above everything else. Rousseau's first work, which instantly made him quite popular by the way, called all of this mumbo jumbo a giant piece of hogwash. He writes in this work, "Has the restoration of the sciences and the arts contributed to the purification or to the corruption of morality? This is the matter we have to examine. What side should I take on this question? That, gentlemen, which suits an honorable man, who knows nothing and who does not, for that reason, think any less of himself." Rousseau maintained that civilized life in and of itself makes a human being completely artificial and cut off from their true nature. This isn't too tough to understand, for no one can argue that humans alter their actions and words by a lot when interacting with society than how they would truly like to act and speak. We sometimes have to take part in activities we do not like, while we profess to like things that we actually do not like, just to appear fashionable and cultured. Perhaps the biggest of them all is the fact that we have to stop ourselves from standing up to what is wrong, because the consequences of doing so would be big. This is a point which we will return to later, for there is a lot of unnecessary wrong because of which morality takes the biggest hit in a civilized society. We lose our authenticity at every step something which the existentialists would stress so much about almost 2.5 centuries later. Writing specifically with the aim to disparage art itself. Nowadays, when more subtle studies and more refined taste have reduced the art of pleasing into principles, a vile and misleading uniformity governs our customs, and all minds seem to have been cast in the same mold. Incessantly politeness makes demands, propriety eschews orders, and incessantly people follow customary usage, never their own inclinations. One does not dare to appear as what one is. Rousseau would not even spare the sciences. He wrote that the sciences were born out of idleness, and they nourished idleness in return. The biggest damage they did to men was to waste their time in pursuits that actually did not matter. If men had instead devoted the time wasted on scientific pursuits to first perfect their moral and ethical lives, inventions such as gunpowder and other weapons would probably not have caused as much loss of life and destruction as they did. Humans argued that science ultimately benefited humans indirectly by making their lifespans longer and curing them of illnesses. But how many more did we actually end up hurting through advances in weaponry without first learning how to act morally and not oppressing the weak? For can anyone really claim that humans themselves have not contributed to their fellow man's sufferings and evils, and that it was for the better that we did not spend more time on figuring out how to act morally and not hurting the innocent? He would contrast and exalt the peoples of ancient Egypt, Persia, the Germanic tribes, and above all, those of Sparta, to the state of artificial society of present day Europe, that is, Europe of his time. To him, the former had a certain simplicity and innocence that was so far off from what he saw around him. Now, the examples that Rousseau gave and the comparisons he made were definitely not historically accurate. But it can be argued that, though the examples weren't true, one can easily understand the overall point Rousseau was trying to make. So, what was the kind of living that Rousseau actually wanted to contrast modern civilization to? This is something he would discuss elsewhere. Unlike some philosophers, like Hobbes, for instance, who had a very negative view of human nature in its truest form, Rousseau viewed humans as someone who were fundamentally good. His view of human beings in the state of nature, without any kind of civilization or state, is that of a species that is innocent and compassionate at its core. Such a man would be someone who would be one with his instincts. He would devote all his energies towards acquiring food, safety, and the bare basic needs required for survival. Interestingly, unlike other philosophers who hypothesized about this bare bones human nature, Rousseau held that man in this state would have no desire or need to hurt others. So, while many, like Hobbes, would argue that the primitive state would have been a dog eats dog world of brutal competition for resources, Rousseau would disagree. Man is not yet moral, but he is no evil brute either. Here, the absence of goodness does not automatically entail the presence of evil. When humans did encounter other humans in such a condition, the feelings evoked were not of competition, but of kindness and compassion arising out of an acceptance of shared nature. To Rousseau, all our complex notions of morality in our present civilized state arise from this basic compassion which humans instinctively feel for others. In fact, we were more compassionate than we can ever expect to be in our current state. In fact, what is generosity? What clemency? What humanity? But pity applied to the weak, to the guilty, or to the human species in general. Even benevolence and friendship, if we judge right, will appear the effects of a constant pity fixed upon a particular object. For to wish that a person may not suffer, what is it but to wish that he may be happy? Though it were true that commiseration, that is, compassion, is no more than a sentiment which puts us in the place of him who suffers, a sentiment obscure but active in the savage, developed but dormant in civilized man. How could this notion affect the truth of what I advance, but to make it more evident? In fact, commiseration must be so much the more energetic, the more intimately the animal that beholds any kind of distress identifies himself with the animal that labors under it. Now, it is evident that this identification must have been infinitely more perfect in the state of nature than in the state of reason. Self love as a thing is absolutely in the center here. But again, self love for Rousseau never meant egoism. It is only in civilized society that self love degenerates into rank egoism, particularly after the origin of private property, something which we will discuss at a later time. It is instinctual self love that gives rise to compassion when we feel that others should be treated the way we would like things to be going on for us. Thus, when we see others in pain, it reminds of us when we were in pain. We can identify ourselves with others. Unlike what people have always said to us, our instincts do not conflict with morality. In fact, true morality actually emerges from them. To Rousseau, there indeed is inequality in the state of nature, but it is natural inequality that results from people being blessed with different levels of natural talents. It is not harmful in any sense. However, once civilized society begins in a particular way, we find political or moral inequality. This is the root cause of all our current evil, and this is what pains most people so much that they want to go back to the natural state of nature. Once material and political power got concentrated in the hands of the few, humanity as a whole lost all its natural morality based on compassion. It is here that basic compassionate thoughts, such as food and shelter for all, are made to sound outlandish. Similarly, a lot of what is deemed legal often goes squarely against what seems naturally compassionate. For a very real life example, just look into the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. Instead of helping the ordinary people, many of whom lost their houses and jobs for no fault of their own, the US government bailed out the banks and the already ultra rich instead, who were actually responsible for the entire crash. All the blame was put on the ordinary, quote unquote, lazy citizens for not doing enough, whatever that meant. All that complex financial jargon was thrown at people who genuinely suffered and had the right grievances to make them feel that it was all their fault. Again, to make things clear, I am not vouching for one economic system over another here. Any system, no matter how perfect on paper, is liable to abuse. My goal is just to elucidate the kind of things Rousseau would have had in his mind. Systems that are not developed properly are all susceptible to similar outcomes. Riches, before the invention of science to represent them, could scarce consist in anything but lands and cattle, the only real goods which men can possess. But when estates increased so much in number and in extent as to take in whole countries and touch each other, it became impossible for one man to aggrandize himself but at the expense of some other. And the supernumerary inhabitants, who were too weak or too indolent to make such acquisitions in their turn, impoverished without losing anything. Because while everything about them changed, they alone remained the same, were obliged to receive or force their subsistence from the hands of the rich, and hence began to flow, according to the different characters of each, domination and slavery or violence. It is thus that the most powerful or the most wretched, respectively, considering their power and wretchedness as a kind of title to the substance of others, even equivalent to that of property. The equality once broken was followed by the most shocking disorders. It is thus that the usurpations of the rich, the pillagings of the poor, and the unbridled passions of all, by stifling the cries of natural compassion and the as yet feeble voice of justice, rendered man avaricious, wicked, and ambitious. Now, Rousseau would not go as far as to say that we ought to destroy everything and go to the most primitive of stages. In fact, he would develop a positive conception of the state as something in which man's faculties could mature to the fullest, something not quite dissimilar to Aristotle. It is not that difficult to imagine a societal and political order that respects and delivers well being to all its inhabitants, and that lies along our basic compassionate instincts. But it is also not hard to see that his views do hold a great degree of truth, especially considering how our world is today. Rousseau was a highly emotional man, and he was much attuned to the fake niceties of social life. His personal disposition, as well as his intellectual arguments, made him go firmly against some of the most cherished Enlightenment ideals. And probably for good reason. We have seen in our previous video itself how progress could be limited to mean progress of only a select few. In contrast, Rousseau forces us to see things as they really are, and for that, he deserves some attention.